So we are starting now. The live streaming has started. So let me take a moment to, welcome all of you to this masterclass and global masterclass on integrating conversation-driven leadership into talent strategy. We are delighted to have all of you, the coaches, HR professional who are joining from across many geographies today. And today's session has is a conversation between two gurus, one from the global guru, Alan Fine, and moderated and hosted by Yogesh Sood, the guru in this part of the world. And so it's my privilege to introduce Yogesh Sood, who's the host, who is going to be anchoring this conversation with Alan Fine. And Yogesh is again a globally respected leadership coach, expert facilitator, managing director, chairman of the BYLD group. And Yogesh is also one of the earliest champions of the conversation centric leadership in India. His work spans senior leadership, teams, large scale talent transformations, and coach development journeys across organizations. Yogesh, being an alumnus of Harvard Business School, founded the first ICF International Coach Federation chapter in South Asia in 2004. So Yogesh, welcome, and I'll be, handing it over. But before that, I will, like to introduce Alan Fine, who does not need an introduction, by the way. Okay, and probably if you heard the chit chat pre event, you probably got an idea. Alan is the founder of InsideOut Development and author of the book called "You Already Know How to Be Great." And he's a globally regarded as one of the pioneers who reshaped how organizations understand coaching, performance, and leadership conversation. And that's what we're going to be picking on, with Yogesh moderating this process and session. And
Yeah,
Alan's work has influenced leaders and coaches across Fortune 500 companies, professionally, sports team, government bodies, and by challenging one core assumption that performance improves by adding more knowledge, but it improves performance by removing interference through better conversations. And that's the part which we are going to be focusing on. So over the next 50 minutes, we are going to, Yogesh is going to anchor this conversation with Alan. 30 minutes will be dialogue. We'll get the privilege to hear the two gurus interact and, also get to hear their stories about this particular topic. And we will open up live interaction at a point in time where you'll keep on, where you can pop your questions in the chat box. I will moderate those questions after the 30 minutes to allow interaction. And then we'll also have a raffle for the entire group, which is going to be there. So if you type hi in the chat box and the name of the city, we are using a technology and a tool through Zoom, which will enter you automatically into the raffle, and three lucky people will be chosen randomly by that raffle tool, and we'll be getting a signed book by Alan Fine, the book I just mentioned, Alan's claim to fame also. You already know how to be great. And it'll be co-signed by Yogesh as we go in there. So go ahead, please type in hi and the city you're logging in. The Zoom will automatically enroll you into the process as we go forward. So with that said, let's begin this conversation on leadership, talent, and the power of what happens between people. Over to you, Yogesh.
well, thank you, Sandeep, and welcome to all of you, and particular welcome to Alan, because it's early morn for him in that part of the world in the US, but still he is there happy and smiling and looking good. So thanks for being there, Alan. And also thanks to Alan's colleague, Laura is there. I hope Bill is also joining soon. We look forward to interacting with Alan in the next 30-35 minutes. Alan, before we jump into the real topic, I just want to check, your thinking on two particular points. One is that, as Sandeep mentioned, we started this ICF chapter in 2004, and initially we found a lot of resistance. People said, well, what coaching and this coaching and that coaching, lot of hesitation and reluctance. And suddenly it took up. following 10 years, and after COVID in particular, there has been a rush towards getting certified and all that. Do you see that pattern across the globe?
Well, first of all, thank you both for inviting me to do this. You're asking me to talk about my favorite subject. Um, and yes, um, I do see a lot more of this across the globe. I think there's a better recognition of the power of coaching, that in my view, it's the biggest lever you can pull to impact people's performance. It's something with my background in the sports world. It's something we grow up with. It's in the kind of culture of sport. I think it's now becoming, if not already there, it's in the culture of business as well because of the impact that it can have.
Yep. Well, thanks a lot for that. And your famous video when coaching on the tennis court, it's a kind of a wonderful display of how these things can change. And secondly, I would also invite you to comment in a briefly on group model per se, because there are a lot of misconception or confusion in the market, who owns it up, and how they can use it.
Well, the model was developed, gosh, more years ago than I really want to own up to anymore. And there were three of us involved in the development of it. Sadly, my colleagues back then have both passed on now. So I guess I am the last remaining author of the model.
Okay, thanks for that clarity, and we wish you that you live the topic. You have been a sports coach, knowledge, but they struggle because they can't access that knowledge in that particular
Yogesh,
moment.
we
That
lost you for
means
the
they are
last
not
10
able to apply
seconds.
that when needed.
Yogesh, we lost you for the last 10 seconds.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
can you hear me
Now it's
now?
good. Yeah.
Hello,
Yes.
is it better? Okay, great. Thank you. Well, so my question was that, as you often say, that people don't struggle to deal with conversations. At the heart of any decision, conversation is there, but they have the knowledge, they don't lack it. But because they can't access that knowledge in the moment they need it, right? So, what actually blocks that access in day to day conversations or everyday conversations, if I may say?
Well, I think there's a concept I like to call interference, mental
Mhm.
interference. And when we're experiencing that, and everybody in the world certainly that I've ever met experiences interference at one time or another. So it doesn't matter whether you're an absolute beginner or you're a world champion at whatever it is, there
Mhm.
are times where we'll experience interference. And one
Mhm.
way to think about it is it's internal dialogue. I think in psychology, they call it self-talk. And
Mhm.
when that self-talk becomes very noisy, it gets much, much harder to access the knowledge, the experience, the talent that we already have.
Mhm.
One way to describe it is I sometimes call it watch out mode. It's when we go into um, the fight or flight response is what it used to be called. I think that these days they call it what is it? The amygdala hijack,
Yes. Yep.
where we get where our responses get hijacked by our survival mechanisms.
Mhm.
And when that happens, we tend to behave and react to things out of reflex rather than being able to access our ability to think things through.
Yeah.
So interference can show up. A classic example would be somebody who maybe very good at, say, speaking to a group of 24 people, put them in front of 2,000 people, and it can trigger a lot of interference, and that has a huge effect on their ability to speak naturally about something they're very expert at.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I'm speaking from experience when I say that, because that was me. So interference is it's the nature of being human. I think there's times where we need to be in the fight or flight response, but when it gets triggered in circumstances where it's not really necessary, it gets in the way of our ability to do things like, for instance, have a conversation with somebody, have a constructive conversation.
Oh,
So,
okay. Thanks. Yeah.
I'd invite our group to think about, usually when I poll people, how many of you have had a conversation recently that you wish you could have a do-over? In other words, you could do it again because it didn't go well. Usually everybody puts a hand up when I ask that question.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like we don't know how to talk, but it's easy to make the assumption that because we talk all day, every day, that we always talk well and skillfully.
Yep.
And the evidence is that that's not true. So interference, these things that go on in our mind, the self-talk that gets in the way of us doing things as well as we can.
Well, thank you very much for that, Alan. And I know that, you always say that systems and strategies and competencies are important, but in the business, outcomes ultimately, kind of decided by the daily conversations managers have got. And in your view, what makes conversations the most underutilized and most understood because they can, have better leverage in talent strategy?
What makes them um, ask me the question again, Yogesh.
Yeah, what makes the conversations to be misunderstood or underutilized?
Well, I think the interference is
Okay.
what um, gets them misunderstood. I think it's very easy. I think, as I just mentioned,
Yep.
because we all think that because we live in a world of conversation,
Mm-hmm.
we all think we do it well. And I
Uh-huh.
think part of the problem, and I think this, by the way, is the problem with all performance in anything, not just in conversation, is the gap between what we think we do and what we actually do. So those
Okay.
of us in the world of coaching, we're always working on gaps, whether it's at the remedial end of the spectrum because there's a problem, or whether we've got a high performer who we're trying to help perform at an even higher level. It's always about closing a gap between where somebody is and where they want to be. And as they talk about in emotional intelligence, the first step is awareness, self-awareness. And I think
Yep.
a lack of that self-awareness really gets in the way of people becoming more skillful.
Yeah, and that's a very powerful thing you're saying because as we grow higher in the hierarchy, our self-awareness keeps on getting lower because we think we have arrived and we got the right to have conversation the way we want. And instead of listening, it kind of becomes more of a monologue that you listen to me, I'm here to tell you. In line with that, tell me something which is, in your view and experience and research, what are the non-negotiable conversation behaviors for leaders which you think are must? Of course, you mentioned one in terms of interference. What are the other things leaders need to watch for?
Oh, I think there are three things that I see. I think about it as in terms of um, lead and lag measures. And
Mm-hmm.
I actually think there's almost an over focus on the lag measures and a neglect of the lead measures that lead to the lag measures. And there's three things that I see that great leaders, great coaches, They all do these three things. One is they get very clear on what the goal of any conversation is.
Okay.
So they're clear in their own mind and they get agreement with the person that they're talking to. I think the second one is that they are really good active listeners. So this is where they listen so intently that they're able to summarize what the other person in the conversation is saying, summarize it back to them to their satisfaction. So it's not just parroting back. And that requires an ability to stop listening to our internal dialogue so that we can listen fully to the person that we're engaged with.
Okay.
So clear goals, active listening. And the third one is clear agreements about what happens next. They don't leave the conversation without the plan, if you like. And there's three things in my mind that go into that plan, three behaviors. They make sure that people involved in the conversation say what they're going to do next, and then they agree how they're going to do what they say they're going to do, and they agree that there's going to be communication along the way, particularly if they're unable to do what they said they would do. I call it SADUCO for short. Say what
Oh,
you'll do what you say, communicate when you can't.
right.
And that, to me, is the bottom line or the nuts and bolts of accountability.
Oh,
So
brilliant.
clear
Hmm.
goals, active listening, and agreed next steps for me are the three lead measures. Without those, you're not going to see much move on the lag measures.
Yeah, that's very interesting because you also brought in angle of accountability, which can be better if you take the what next and those kind of decisions. Now, many times you have
I've
seen, yeah, sorry, go on.
I've come to believe that um, one way to describe what we're doing in coaching is supporting people to be accountable, but accountable to themselves, not
Wow.
accountable to their leader.
Mm-hmm.
Ownership and transformation happens when they're accountable to themselves. And
Mm-hmm.
that, to me, that's the real power in coaching is when it supports people to be accountable to themselves more than other people. I see accountability. Sometimes it's a bit punitive. People are wagging their finger. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's the most effective way to use accountability. People
Mm-hmm.
want to do a great job. Let's help them do that.
Right. Right. So look at it from the angle of application, or how do we embed these skills? And I'm sure in your experience, you would have come across teams, leaders, organizations who know it, but they're not able to implement it or build a culture around it. Right. Now, so in your experience or in your own perspective, is there anything specific which you dealt with in an organization where you found this kind of thing? You know, and then coaching really help or conversations really improve the results. Any example comes to your mind?
Yeah, there's a pattern, I think, in organizations that do this, um, that embed these behaviors successfully.
Yep.
I think there's a number of things that go on. One is that they make it very clear for everybody what the win is in doing it. What's the benefit of doing it?
Mm-hmm.
Another thing they do, and for me this is absolutely critical and is frequently missed, is they engage the leadership. The
Mm-hmm.
leaders need to be not just blessing it, but they need to be involved and modeling.
Mm-hmm.
They need to ensure that as they think through how they go about changing the behaviors, what are the driving and resisting forces that are, and the processes and systems that are going to either support it and or get in the way of it happening.
Mm-hmm.
I think they deploy training in these skills that is very simple, actionable, and scalable.
Mm-hmm.
And then lastly, they make sure that there's some feedback loop where people are able to practice and get feedback on what they do, because without that, I believe it's very hard to change behavior. Now, what most organizations tend to do is focus on the training component.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like that doesn't make any difference, but when they do those other things, particularly when leaders model it, that's when they begin to see some significantly increased traction. And it goes
Mm-hmm.
to that to that concept of the shadow of a leader.
Okay.
Leaders cast shadows on their people, and they
Mm-hmm.
do it by what they say and don't say, and what they do and don't do. If
Mm-hmm.
leaders don't do anything when we're trying to have change the behavior of the organization, leaders don't model the behavior, the message to everybody else is it's not
Mm-hmm.
important.
Yep. In our conversations with the clients, once a client, very senior leader, said that I want to change the culture of our organization. And we said, what is that you want? He said that I often find that in our own behaviors, there's a gap in audio and visual, which you rightly mentioned just now. That audio visual do not synchronize with each other. They say something, they do something else, and that is my main problem, which I want to solve. And when we talked to his, kind of team members who were board directors, he said he needs to first correct himself because he is the best example of a mismatch audio visual. And that's what you're saying, that leaders need to model, you know. So, any thoughts on that?
I think that's absolutely right. I've never heard it described that way. There's an interesting an audio visual gap, but that's exactly what it is.
Uh huh.
And leaders are it's interesting to me. Leaders understand that the power of their role in some respects, and I think they go unconscious to it when it might demand that they do something different. And
Mm-hmm.
they can model for their people being open to learning and what it takes to change. And that's part of how they create the psychological safety. When teams
Mm-hmm.
see their leaders trying to do things differently and being vulnerable, that makes it okay for everybody else to do it. When teams see
Mm-hmm.
their leaders cover up, try to pretend
Mm-hmm.
that they're doing something they're not, that sends an equal but opposite message.
Okay. Well, that's a great perspective, Alan. And one thing I always wonder in my own mind, that irrespective of the hierarchy or your social position or corporate ladder you are at, at home, people have different behaviors, right? And even the chief executive or the chairman would be just a man at home, right? Now, how does that happen? I mean, you're living in two different worlds. How does that happen?
It's yeah, it I don't know. I've often asked people. Um, I would give them an example of when I used to teach tennis.
Mm-hmm.
That the the way I would go about. Um, well, actually, let me talk about it this way. When I talk to leaders about their involvement, let's say in their children's recreation.
Mm-hmm.
They coach their soccer team, they coach their baseball teams, whatever it is, their cricket teams. The when they when they're coaching the kids, they don't make a separation between coaching conversations and other conversations. In other words, when they're coaching their kids, they are always on. But the moment they step into their organization, they make this separation. I'm coaching or I'm not coaching. And that to me seems actually, it seems ridiculous because all coaching is, in the end, is a conversation where intending to be helpful. We're trying to close a gap between where we are and where we need to go. Why would we not use the skills of coaching in every conversation that we have, not just when we're with our kids or when it's a coaching conversation?
Yeah, and any thoughts on that? Why that differentiation creeps in, or, in most critical moments?
Um, I wish I knew. I suspect it's to do with we have a set of expectations about behaviors in different circumstances, and we don't question them. And I think that it's sometimes it's really hard to see the kind of culture. I think Stephen Covey used to say, does a fish know it swims in water? Sometimes we don't recognize what our beliefs and expectations are, and we just carry
Yeah.
on with the same behavior, which in my mind
Right.
points us back to the value of coaching, because I think one of the powerful things that it does is it helps people look in the mirror and test their beliefs and expectations and assumptions. And only
Yep.
then are they going to see
Hmm.
what the gaps might be.
Yeah. Yeah. The interesting part here is that thinkers like Stephen Covey or Ken Blanchard, they have been talking about this. You have been talking about this for decades now. Do you really see a difference coming in the way people are behaving on these lines?
What an interesting question. I think there's a better recognition of the value of these behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the indications of that to me is the growth of coaches in
Mm-hmm.
the world, people who are involved in coaching one way or another. What I don't think has changed is the tendency for we human beings to experience interference.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's very obvious, let's say in the world of sport, that standards very obviously get higher and higher. The
Right.
world records are always being set. But equally, these world champions still have off days. And one of the
Yep.
reasons they have off days is they get mental interference.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the nature of being human means that when we're under pressure, when we're under stress, interference is likely to be present. And it that's going to be I think the day that we move past that is the day the world becomes enlightened.
Well, thanks, and that brings me to a thinking point when you talk about an example from sports. Do we or can we draw an inference that sports people who have gone through sports coaching can be better leaders in the corporate world?
I think they bring a set of skills
Mm-hmm.
that are already developed. Many years ago, um, I was actually working on this CEO's sport. He was from South Africa,
Uh-huh.
and he was passionate about his golf. And we got in a conversation about his hiring practices. And he said he always tries to hire ex-athletes. And
Oh,
I asked
okay.
him why. And he
Mm-hmm.
said, because they've already developed things like resilience. I can
Mm-hmm.
train skills, but I
Mm-hmm.
can't train those character, those resilience skills, or it's much harder to train those.
Right.
So if I hire ex-athletes, I'm already a long way down the road.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, would you recommend to organizations, like if they have to build conversation culture or coaching culture, they need to encourage sports within the organization?
Well, I don't think they need to embrace sports,
Okay.
much as I'm a fan of sports. But
Uh-huh.
um, I do think being really clear that of those basic behaviors, and that what it takes to change behavior is repetition and feedback. I think it's very easy to get caught up in the intellectual understanding and think, if I understand, I therefore do.
Mm-hmm.
And if that was true, well, you'd be talking to one of the world champion tennis players, because I understand a lot about that sport. I taught it for years.
Right.
And all that understanding never made me even, I would never even qualify for Wimbledon. There's a lot more to it than just understanding, and this repetition and feedback is what enables people to bring out that raw talent, to refine the raw
Hmm.
talent that they have.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and that reminds me of a friend of mine, Alan, and he's very enthusiastic climber. He would go for expeditions in the Himalayas and all those peaks. And he said something very interesting. Once he retired from the corporate job, he takes a group of people to these regions, take high in the mountains. And he said that I asked him a question. I said, "Why are you doing what you're doing?" He said, "The real coaching conversations and testing happens there, because otherwise we are in a made-up environment at home or in the office. But when you're there, it's your survival game."
Yep.
So any thoughts on that?
Um, I have had exactly that experience many years ago. I was involved with an expedition. It was led by an Everest climber.
Mm-hmm.
We climbed Mont Blanc
Mm-hmm.
in on the France-Italy border.
Right. Right.
And we did it with a team of executives from a very well-known company.
Oh, wonderful.
And
Uh-huh.
it causes, I don't like heights, I don't like being exposed, and it causes you to be, you have no option other than to be vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a really powerful way to help people learn about how they learn.
Mm-hmm.
In a much more milder way, there was a time where I used to take executives on a tennis court and
Mm-hmm.
have them coach each other on the non-technical aspects of the game.
Mm-hmm.
When executives have to put shorts on and get in an environment where they're not comfortable and not experienced,
Mm-hmm.
that really lowers the barriers in the conversations.
Right, right. And I would like to pick up on the word which you used, vulnerability. And why do leaders and people in general feel insecure to be vulnerable? Is it societal pressure? Is it inner interference, as you said? What are the reasons?
Um, I no, a lot of this depends on definitions, but I think it's their egos.
Oh,
They,
okay.
I think their egos get caught up in looking a certain way. And what I find interesting is, by way of example, when people first see themselves on video, um, it's vividly kind of etched in my mind because the first time I saw that, everybody's sitting there. And you can see that they're in a fight or flight response. They're afraid of what's going to show up on the video. And when it shows up, of course, everybody else in the room doesn't react because we all know what you look like. We live and work with the way you are. We love you anyway. The only person who's ever surprised in what shows up in the video is the person who's in the video.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, the example I shared earlier, that gentleman who called us to look at how we can change the behavior people, his direct reports, and we asked him to videotape himself, right? And in the videotape, he came across that he was pointing fingers and he was people shutting people off and so on and so forth. And the first reaction was, "No, it is not me. I'm not the
Yeah,
person there."
they,
You
they
know?
literally use those words, don't they?
Yeah, yeah.
And they go through those, it's almost like stages of grief. They get angry, then they
Right.
deny it, then they accept it, then they're ready to do something different.
Yeah.
So,
And I think you're saying a very powerful word. You're saying that accept it. If we learn to do that, then obviously the rest of the journey becomes more comfortable. But acceptance is the part. So if you
Yeah.
look at the entire journey of conversations, whether you're coaching, counseling, or doing the performance review, or even journal, you said it has to be like fish to the water. You quoted Stephen Covey there. Now, the question to you would be, Alan, that if all this happens, what are the initial visible signs that this thing is working so that they can accelerate the momentum?
Oh, I think a number of things happen. Um, I think at the managerial level, people are never surprised. For instance, they're never surprised when they get an evaluation
Mm-hmm.
because there's been a lot of coaching going along before they ever get to the evaluation.
Mm-hmm.
I think they come to their leaders for help in thinking things through
Mm-hmm.
instead of coming for answers, solutions.
Okay.
And most importantly, I think results start to change, and you can measure those results in lots of different ways.
Mm-hmm.
One might be the speed of decision making.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
that increases. I think you can measure it in terms of engagement. You
Mm-hmm.
can measure it in terms of retention.
Mm-hmm.
And I think ultimately you can measure it in terms of ultimately in terms of revenue.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. So it has got direct impact on results. That's what
Yeah.
we hear say. Yeah. And then,
You,
Helen, that's very interesting. Yeah, Sandeep, you're saying something.
yeah, I hate to interrupt this one. So I promise the audience that we will get them to talk to you both.
All
So
right.
go ahead, finish it up, and then I will bring in the questions from the audience.
Yeah, sure. So my last just quick question to Ellen is, Ellen, we know all these benefits are there. Still, the execution of the same there remains a gap. And you mentioned that, just to sum it up, you mentioned internal interference, ego is there, and possibly they don't even have the skills, which they need to build up. And that is where, professionals such as you, who are guiding the world in this direction, are doing a tremendous job of helping people. And that is where we need to be in the changing times, and even the Gen Z, etc., which we deal with. We can't be their masters or their superiors. We need to be their partners in conversations. If conversations can happen, feedback would be more acceptable. If feedback is more acceptable, then change possibly would be much higher, and recognition will happen also simultaneously. So I kind of take a break here. Sandeep, over to you. And Aaron, thank you for answering my questions. Now it's open to audience, right? Thank you.
Yes. So, first question, you guys, I'll also lean on you because
Sure.
I've requested both of you to do that.
Okay.
This question is for Alan. Alan, first question is from Supriti Funny, and she's saying, okay, what are the top 2 or 3 pointers when we talk about feedback, which you would give to them as leader?
Oh, um, to me, feedback, first of all, feedback is just data and it's just a perspective on events. And I think leaders sometimes think that because they have this title, that means they are the most accurate observer of events. And therefore, they don't make feedback a two-way thing. They don't make it a conversation. They make it a I know and you don't. And I think understanding that there's so if it was you and I, for instance, Sogesh, the understanding that I have a point of view, you will have an experience, and the point of my sharing my point of view is to help you pay more attention to what actually happened. And both of us might discover something new out of doing that. That to me is the most important part of it. It's a conversation between two people. It's not it's not nearly as useful when it comes from I know and you don't.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
You guys would like to build on that?
No, well, that's very interesting perspective, because if I'm able to navigate my own thoughts, and that is the biggest challenge we face as leaders. And it's a question of how open, vulnerable, and malleable I am. As you know, 1 minute manager, we know there's a famous book, and Ken talks about 1 minute coaching, redirecting. So, not saying that you tell the person to do what, it is a gentle redirecting. And that's what Ken has also, I mean, Ellen has also said in many times, that video, go in the office space and be, you talks about to people and how, that works. It's a very interesting part he's saying. So that's it. I'll rather let Alan comment because we can host this
No, we've got a
conversation
lot of
more.
questions. We have a lot of
Thank you.
questions.
Okay, all right.
So,
Thank you.
yeah. So next one, and both of you can lead on this one, is organizations know the value of manager as a coach skill set, mindset. However, somehow either they don't have the culture, or how can we, more importantly, create a culture where it becomes part of life or way of life?
Yogesh, go after you.
Well, thank you, Alan. When you're looking at creating a culture of coaching in organizations, at best companies do training. They say, I want to train my leaders to be coaches, and this is the certification, and do that. But I think I lean on to what Alan said initially, that are they role modeling? You know, they would say, make my managers, coaches, but am I a coach? That's the first question, and that also links in with what Alan was saying, accountability for self. If I'm expecting a culture to take place, in fact, we did for all of us, we did a small experiment in an organization where we were kind of coaching different people, the business heads, 5 or 6 of them, and we found that where business heads or the leaders for that particular unit or group were not only advocating but also showcasing those coaching mindset and skill set, the results were much better. So I think it starts from there, So that's what my perspective. But Alan, over to you.
I want to emphasize something that you mentioned there. I think that even when you've got the most senior leaders modeling the behavior, I think sometimes there's a lack of accountability in driving it through the rest of the organization. And what I mean by that is the senior leaders need to support and inspect that their people, the people they're leading, are modeling these behaviors. And then they need to model and support that down another level. And when wherever that breaks down in the hierarchy, that's where the behaviors kind of to go missing. So I think it's so important that at the very top, they not only model, but they support the people that report to them to be accountable for doing exactly the same thing.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. And just to add a line there, Sandeep, with your permission, I think there's no way organizations are measuring the coaching per se. As you rightly said, cascading
True.
of it, impact it is creating, and how people are getting affected. I don't think any organization, even the most evolved ones, are measuring it. So maybe that is one area which they need to reinforce, as you rightly saying. Over to you, Sandeep. Thank you.
Thanks. Alan, you wanted to say something? Okay, Alan, this question is for you specifically because I'm combining a couple of questions. One is when you and your colleagues Sir John Whitmore and Abraham was working on the Grow model, what did you hope to achieve through this through the creating the Grow model? So they're taking you back into early days.
Yeah, that's testing my memory. So I I don't think we set out to achieve anything in creating the model other than making it easier for people to do the behaviors.
Hmm.
So I think the three of us were fairly skillful at asking awareness raising questions that caused people to take responsibility for what they paid attention to. I think we were quite skillful with that. What we didn't have was the model that made it easier for others to do exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
And when the model kind of crystallized, it just, I mean, it just took off, and it made it so much easier for people to do the same thing. So even people who coaching doesn't come naturally to, when they follow the model, which is only a model, in my mind, it's only a model of how people do decisions. They
Yeah,
start in reality, they set a goal of where they want to get to, they develop options that'll take them from reality to the goal. They choose one or more of those. That's the way forward. So all of us exist in the model anyway. It's when we actually crystallize it into these stages, it just makes it so much easier. It's like having a checklist.
yeah,
Yep.
Yeah, pilots use checklists because they save lives. Surgeons use checklists because the checklists save lives. Grow is like having a checklist for a conversation. And by the
that's
way,
a
not just a conversation with someone else, but a conversation that we have with ourselves when we're trying to figure something else, figure something out. Grow can be really helpful with that too. So our intention was just make it more accessible for people to ask awareness raising questions.
curiosity question. Would it be different for Gen Z? Because there is a lot of talk about Gen Z being very different.
Yeah, I think they demand coaching more than other generations. Yeah, they're not going to put up with the old command and control. But the
Yeah.
basics of decision making are the same with Gen Z.
True. Another question from Diksha Jacob is that what would be the most invisible interference that even experienced leaders struggle to see in themselves? Yogesh, Alan, both of you are most welcome to respond.
The most invisible. What an interesting question. I think it's well, with the caveat that I'd want to reflect on this a lot more, but my instant answer is when their egos get caught up in wanting to show up a particular way. Yeah, I think it's hard to recognize, and I think it's very, very powerful in people.
Yeah, and so if I may add here is the two words which came earlier, and Alan also used the vulnerability part of it, and kind of looking at the internal interference, because when we are vulnerable, and also creating psychological safety for others, conversation, of course, for self also, the conversation can go far more smoothly. So if the leaders at any level can say, I'm vulnerable and I'm willing to share it, willing to express it, willing to show it, and also in the entire process, I want to create psychological safety for others, because these are the two fundamental pivots or anchors for any conversation, including coaching one, and more so coaching one. And that is very difficult to do, because as we keep on higher, rising in hierarchy, and also it depends upon our psychometric profiling like DISC, etc., where I'm dominant, or I'm more open to those kind of things which are inherent in me, because I have been brought up like that. I have grown up in that kind of environment or kind of circumstances, and that is who I am today. So it also linked to our personality. Many people can hide their emotions well, many will show it at the first instance. So at the end of the day, how vulnerable I am and how I'm willing to look at the psychological safety for my own self. In fact, one research shows that in crucial moments or in difficult conversations, even leaders feel unsafe, right? And that is where they go and lean back on their hierarchy or position or knowledge or whatever they've got, they bring to the table. So I think those are the two things important for us.
Thank you. That's well said. Kriti Darula, she professes to be your fan, Alan, and she's from Kuala Lumpur. And her question to you is that in high stakes and constantly changing environment, where the pressure to make correct and fast decision is high, how can a coach help a leader distinguish between critical thinking and paralyzing interference? I mean, these questions are coming from heart and experience of people.
Yeah. Um, but I think one of the things that coaches do is they help coachees test their assumptions.
Yeah.
So they help them look at is what they think is true about their reality. What's the evidence for that? What are the assumptions, and what do I know to be true? So they hold the mirror up to the coachee. I think that whole testing of assumptions, it's asking questions like, how do you know this to be true, is absolutely critical. And I'm not sure. Well, I'll go as far. I've had folks say to me that coaching is only asking questions. And I think that's a hugely important part of coaching. But I think there's more to being an effective coach than only asking non-directive questions. I think there's experience that can be brought in that helps us test assumptions. And even if you've no experience, which is the position I find myself in most often in coaching, you can still ask people, how do you know that what you've just described is true? What's the data?
Yeah. Uh, Last one, Alan, because there are a lot of questions and we are under pressure for time. I'm trying to put them together so that maybe both you and Yogesh. I think one question in different shape and form is coming is what recommendation and advice you have for people who want to start coaching or are new to coaching. I think they're referring to being a professional coach.
Oh, I would say start doing it in any or every conversation you have. Every conversation we have, in one way or another, has a goal. So start using a model like Grow. Doesn't matter what the model is, but start using a model to guide the conversation. And as you get experience at doing that, then people start to say, they start to come to you because they know you help them think things through. And when they start doing that, that's probably the time you can, we say, hang out your shingle and start doing it as a professional.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and if I add here, Sandeep, as some we were
please.
talking about, Alan was earlier talking about a checklist. And if we have got two or three pointers in the checklist, am I speaking less? Am I here listening out? Am I being empathetic, etc., etc.? And then be the scientist and the subject. That means I'm not only displaying that, but also observing myself in the conversation. So I'm operating at two levels. And that is a big learning curve people go through when they are beginning to become coaches. Because being a manager and being a coach is very different ball game. As a manager, you got the authority which is given to you, and we tend to lean on to that very quickly and very swiftly at the first instance. While being a coach means more authentic, more kind of listening, and as Alan said earlier, the qualities are there. So those are the kind of things to my mind. A checklist first of all, that these are the two three behaviors. Then I'm constantly observing myself against those behaviors, and at the end of the conversation, willing to take feedback. Look, being vulnerable, I'm trying to work on these three things. Did I do this? And once you start taking feedback, of course, conversations, feedback, and recognition goes hand in hand. You recognize the other person, thank you very much for giving this feedback, and work on that. And next time you ask, am I better? In the next next interaction,
Yeah,
so that's where the constant growth happens. So that's my perspective on that. Thank you.
yeah. So,
There's there's
last
a
chance,
saying.
people.
Oh,
Go
I
ahead,
was
Alan.
just going to add, there's an old saying that God gave us two ears and one mouth, and
Yep.
they should be used in those proportions.
Simple. Yeah. And people, I want to start bringing this down to the promise and the output which we were talking about. We started. I hope you loved this conversation between the two gurus. And Alan, again, thank you very much for your presence, and and Yogesh for moderating this session. As we go forward, there is something more which we have, people, before you run away, as this one. Okay. So uh, it pays to wait, as we say. Okay, so we have already had a raffle. We will announce the books which are signed by Alan Fine. You already know how to be great, and Yogesh would co-sign those books. And we have exclusive offer for before you go. If you want to experience, I think Niyati and team who's heading the sales function have put together a package for all of you in as a special gesture. We have an open program for InsideOut coming up on 30th of January, and you're most welcome at a special price, which is, to experience it before you take it back home, kind of a thing. And we will, follow up with you. We'll send you the reminders to may exercise that option. And lastly, also, in case you want to become a coach and a professional coach, the BYLD group offers level 1, level 2 certification. And again, we have a special pricing through your partners, through your sales team as you are looking. And that's the upcoming Inside Out workshop. Dr. Anand Devan would be taking this workshop, for Inside Out. So it's these questions, and the questions which were coming out of curiosity, out of knowledge, quest for knowledge. Be a part of that event, and we'll make it worthwhile. And yeah, as we go forward. So, Atish and team have probably a small poll for you to give to us, so that these are the things how we like to interact with you, and we can basically bring more such events, global events for you, and people like Alan and Yogesh. Again, it's I was hating myself to stop this conversation. Okay, and thank you, Alan, for early morning. I hope you had your 2 cups of coffee before joining.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Our privilege to have you, Alan. Let's give a big hand of applause to Alan and Yogesh for this one.
Oh, for Alan. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Alan. Thanks a lot. Have a great day ahead of you. Yeah. And thanks, Laura, for organizing it. Thank you very much.
Yeah. And yeah, special thanks to Laura because she made this happen.
Yeah. And thank you to BYLD team who coordinated everything, Sandeep, you particularly. And of course, RP, the marketing team, which worked hard on that. So thanks a lot to all of you.
Thank you. Have a great day. Bye bye, people.
Bye-bye.